is the Indie Review Show.
Yeah. Woohoo.
And After Party, since we're combining those into one now. So.
I love it. As one giant epic show.
Yeah.
I love it.
And we'll see if anybody shows up, since I totally dropped the ball. Got to do the thumbnail and put the thing out beforehand. So anyway.
I know, Corey. You get a pass though. You have the newborn excuse that you can basically use for the next 7 months.
Oh man, yeah. Maddox turned 3 on Sunday.
Dude.
So, yeah,
congrats. That's crazy.
Got the trifecta of the terrible toddler, the prepubescent preteen, and the infant.
I love it.
All at the same time. So it's great.
All right, that sounds like a cocktail from hell. That sounds like a cocktail from hell, but at the same time, I'm sure it's worthwhile.
I'm sure it will be at some point. That's yeah, that'll be good. Oh man, so we're doing the new format. We did it last week on Josh's show, on Josh's channel. We're doing it this week on my channel.
Yes.
And the new format is we're going to do the after party and the end of the review in the same thing. So I'm going to quickly do kind of an intro for a book, probably not too long, and then we'll just kind of jump in and hang out and make some art. So before I do that, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the one thing we should do probably, we're not going to do the scripted intro or anything, but just to let people know if they're first tuning in what this is. Corey and I are both professional artists who do comics, animation, stuff like that. And we also are using Mondays to kind of basically share with each other and with our audiences different indie books that we're into. And so basically this is a show where at the beginning, we're going to just try to show you books we really dig that are comics. Some that are way underrepresented, some that were indie initially and became giant Hollywood films. I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, but hopefully our goal is to get you to be interested in it if you haven't checked it out yet. If you have checked it out, maybe to take another look at it and see some of the cool formal elements of it. And that's basically what the show is. And then afterwards we hang out and work on art. All right. I always forget, do you want me to pitch or you to pitch?
I'll go first so that we can switch cameras while you're doing yours. So if you want to find my stuff, you can go to CoreyKerr.com, and that's on the screen right now. And if you go to CoreyKerr.com, there's color illustrations, ink illustrations, animations, all kinds of stuff on there. Instagram is probably where I'm spending most of my time right now, and YouTube. You're on my YouTube channel, so if you're seeing this, give a little thumbs up and bell and all that jazz. And I will be releasing a finished music video soon. I don't want to say when, because last Monday I said that I wanted to finish it this week, and then the week blew up to stop me from doing that. But at some point in time in the next little while, I'll be finishing that up. And that'll be fun. So that's where you can see my stuff. Josh, where can we see your stuff?
All right. So you can check out my stuff at joshuakemble.com. You can also pick up a copy of 2 Stories, which is still at a discounted rate on Amazon. You can also get it at any indie retailer or local comic book store if you want to support your LCS. But in the meantime, also, definitely pick this up. 2 Stories. If you have Amazon Prime, the nice thing is you can get it for a ridiculously cheap rate. I think it's a little over $6 right now, which is crazy for a $19.99 graphic novel. And you get free shipping if you've got Prime. So yeah, that's kind of my stuff in a nutshell. So let me know, Corey, if you're ready. Give me a thumbs up. Till then, I'll just kind of banter.
No, we're good.
All right, let's do this.
Because I have switched cameras.
Let's get into this review business. So what do you have to bring to us today?
So this is kind of like you said, not as indie as some of the books that we've covered, but
I mean, Dark Horse is totally an independent publisher. So
yes, that's true.
Yeah.
It's indie, but it's also Frank Miller, right? So people have heard of him. Frank Miller, Lynn Varney, or Varley, and it's 300. It's the Battle of Thermopylae, the Battle of the Hot Gates. It is the story of King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans that came to defend Greece against Xerxes. And I came across this comic, and then subsequently the movie, and then I did a deep dive into the history, and I listened to several great courses on it and read a bunch of things. And what's interesting about it is, except for one thing, it's fairly accurate to like what was actually going on. And at the same time, kind of has like a fantastic element to it as far as like the way the storytelling is going. And so anyway, what's the story is old, and it's there, and it's been done to death, in video games and popular culture and things like that. But what I really enjoy about this is kind of the compositional elements of it. And one thing that's great about the movie is that they adapt. It's one of the best adaptations I think that there ever has been, because they like used, some of these panels, like this panel, are like almost shot for shot kind of what's going on. The closing credits, it kind of pulls out on this panel. And so they heavily referenced for the cinematography this book. But I just find it fascinating, like as a historical narrative, but also, these aren't superheroes. They don't have superpowers, but they train in such a way that, it causes them to just be legendary. And in fact, a lot of the historians say, when you're talking about the Spartans, that it's really hard to get an accurate read on history with Spartans, because they were so well known and so legendary that it's difficult to tell fact from fiction, because back then you didn't have cameras, you didn't have like lore and things like that. And so wherever you had lore, it was a lot of word of mouth. And so if you can imagine, a military precision of just like the entire society is built around creating these warriors. I just love the grotesque nature of this character. And so they fought like no one ever had before, and very few since. And in fact, really interesting cultural link between the Spartans and the samurai. They were trained in very similar ways. Content warning, by the way, it's a little grotesque in certain scenes, because it's a very vicious hand-to-hand combat battle. So anyway, great book, really well written too. A lot of the lines and the storytelling. It's kind of a fairly common storytelling narrative where somebody after the fact is telling the story. They're the narrator, but it's interspersed with kind of the dialogue. And anyway, I love it, and it's one of the best. It's horizontal as well, which is kind of uncommon for a lot of comic books, but it was drawn in a horizontal format. And just things like this, the precision of what's going on here is fairly accurate to how they fight in a phalanx, where the shield is covering half of them, and then the other half of their shield is protecting. Stupid camera. I gotta fix that. Come on, where's the button? I just got a new setup from work, and I'm still apparently fixing all the kinks. Yeah. Anyway, so it's great. Highly recommended. Really well done. And if you want to study composition or action sequences, like how to track what's going on in a fight through a fight, which is really quite difficult to do. For lack of a better term, camera angles. So we have Xerxes here, who's worshipped as a god. And he you see him from like a really low angle, and then we see that same shot, him framed there, and then we see like people looking up at him as he's like being carried, and he's always like in gold and black. So that's my recommendation. You've read this, right?
Yeah, it's a great book. I mean, there's a couple things I love about this. The one, I mean, obvious thing is like just the choice to do a horizontal format book is pretty awesome. Also just compositionally, the use of blacks, like there are a few artists out there. Frank Miller's obviously like at the top of the list, who can just kind of like make silhouette work like 20 times more than most artists. And I love the use of silhouette in this, and the use of like figure foreground flips, and like just the strong control of like just solid black and white. I would actually love to see, I wonder if there's got to be an edition of this that's just black and white. That would be really fun to look at.
There's got to be an artist edition or something, because it would be awesome.
Yeah. I think it's great. I think it's it's historically close, I guess. It's the thing I like about the history in it is Miller plays up sort of the legendary nature of it and just sort of leans into the mythological part of it too. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes it really fun. So he's basically taking like an already mythical story and just kind of turning it up to 11. Yeah. And I think that makes it super exciting. But yeah, definitely like, the research involved in like the formations of the fighting and the plot and stuff. I definitely think it's one of Miller's stronger works. Yeah. It definitely falls prey to a lot of stuff that a lot of Miller's work falls to, where it's like pretty flat female characters, pretty flat, like side characters, but like very, very in-depth study of like, the main, protagonists. So it like, if you like Frank Miller, I'd say it's probably like one of his most masterful pieces. I dig it almost as much as I dig like the original Sin City. But yeah, it's great. It's just great stuff. And it's fun to see comics take on something that's not just like, again, it's got epic battles and fights and stuff like that, but it's not, Batman.
Right. And it's kind of a shame that he writes flat female characters, because Queen Gorgo is like one of the coolest women in history. Like she was pretty hardcore. And she gets a nod here or there, and they actually kind of exaggerated and played it up in the movie more than the comic, but she's pretty awesome. The Spartans had two kings, because one of them would always be in battle, and so there was always two kings, because they just assumed that one of them would always die. And she was the queen. And back then, I mean, this is thousands of years ago. Today, this seems not like it's not a big deal, but back then they would, the Spartan women were as educated and as trained as the men. And so in a lot of cultures, most cultures, women didn't read and write. They didn't go to school. They were, unless you were in some sort of landed gentry, then outside of that, you wouldn't. But Spartan women all read and write and were all as literate and educated as the men, and were trained in battle as well, based on some kind of erroneous understanding of how genetics work. They figured if the women could fight and read, then they would produce smart and fierce warriors as well. So anyway, yeah. I also I really dig the fact that while it's mythical and kind of exaggerated, he also doesn't dance around some of the more problematic Spartan practices. In fact, he kind of leans into it. And I think again, it's like it's a fun book. It's a fun book, but I think it's best taken for what it is, which is like I almost view it as like it's like a great orchestral composition based on a historical event. Like it's like if you were making like a big great opera
of the story of like the 300 Spartans. It is super fun. The sequel, I would say I'm not as much a fan of, just for people out there. It's a beautiful book, keenly edited too. Deanna Schultz is the editor. I love that editor. She's great. But yeah, it's just it's a hard book to like not dig, because but the format's great. I love the fact. I always love it when a publisher doesn't shirk around spending the money to print a beautiful book. In that case, like they spent the money on the formatting, the page, the pages are beautiful. Like I think the cover's like a matte, right? Like a matte finish.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's a good book. Yeah. And then like again for just dynamic paneling too. That's another thing, man. There's not a lot of people who do paneling with as much movement as Miller.
Yeah. It's not like he does, like some of the books that we've reviewed, you can kind of see like, oh, there's the pattern that that they're going for, and you see that pattern everywhere. Yeah, he doesn't have much of a pattern. He just kind of tells it, as it needs to be in that particular spot. So yeah. So if you're interested in that book or any other books that we've reviewed, you can go to irsagency.com, and the links at irsagency.com are all affiliate, and so it doesn't cost you anything more. We get a little bit of a kickback there, and so I recommend that book. And we covered a lot of books in the past, and you can just click on past shows there, and I'll take you to all the different past episodes that we've done. So
yeah.
And sorry.
Before we get into the after party, I'd just say, like, if you guys are interested in this or the Great Courses series that, like Corey mentioned too, we have an Audible affiliate. So if you go to Audible and you put in like IRS, it will give us a little kickback, costs you nothing extra, and it gives you like, I think, a free ebook or something. So
no, you can get a free audiobook.
Yeah. So I mean, there you go. Get your book on the 300 and find out for yourselves. And I will say, Great Courses series, man, they're so good. I'm like knee deep into one of like the history of philosophy, and it's excellent. And it's a chance to like, I don't want to oversell it, but it's like Corey and I both are big fans, because it's like you can kind of sit in like a Harvard classroom for like nothing.
Like a lot of the people that like this show, they're creators, they're making things. And the Great Courses, man, that is some of the best listening you can do while you're making stuff, because there's nothing to look at. Your mind can wander a little bit, but it won't, because it's interesting. But if it does, it's not that big of a deal. It's really fascinating. And they have stuff on like almost every topic, and it's not like I'm going to get the best teacher at my university. It's like you're going to get the best teacher of that subject that exists. Yeah. Of any school. And so, it's really, really worth it. I'm trying to find the here's classic mythology is a really good one. I'm trying to find the one that was on Greek tragedy. Masterpieces of ancient Greek. I've listened to like 7 of them, so I'm trying to think of the ones. Anyway, I'll find it. I'll find the one that covers like kind of the Spartans, but well worth it. Yeah, the one on the French Revolution is really, really good too.
Oh, dude, French Revolution's just good reading in general. It's like anything you can get on different historical eras. World War II stuff is fascinating. Like, they have pretty much any topic you'd want, and it's great, And if you get bored and you want to like get knee deep into like apologetics, like boom, there's courses on it. There's courses on everything. But yeah, I absolutely love the Great Courses series. And like the neat thing is, it's like, with Audible, it's like 1 credit, and then you get like a whole like 72 hours or whatever. Kayla was asking us if this is a new show format, and mentioned it's on a different channel now. Yes, it's on Corey's channel. We have condensed the indie review show and the IRS after party into one show. So we're doing shorter reviews and then just kind of hanging out and doing art.
Yep.
Um,
So
Cool.
yeah, new format. We're gonna try this for a while. We actually did what, I don't know, 20 something episodes or something the other way.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we'll try this for a bit and see how it goes. But so anyway, so we're gonna take a short break, and we'll be back with the after party.
Yes.
I didn't queue up. I should have. If I was doing this professionally, I would have this like totally queued up. But we'll be back in 2 minutes.
I love it.
It's the after party.
Woo! Yeah, after party. How's it going?
Yep, going okay. Crazy week.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to demo part of my kitchen all of a sudden, do all kinds of different things. It was a little nuts.
Yeah, for those of you who watched the last indie review show, which is on my channel, the Corey had to leave very quickly because like his refrigerator just started I think pouring water. You'd have to kind of describe. Yeah,
it just died. Like it just stopped keeping things cold, and then it started spitting water everywhere at one point, and all kinds of fun things that yeah. So it was done, and it's like not an old fridge, so it's really quite frustrating. But we called like several people, and they're all like, no. So we're like living out of coolers for a little bit, and then COVID, there's like a production disruption for like everything that exists.
Yeah.
And refrigeration is one of them. Like apparently it's really hard to get a refrigerator. Electrolux just like shut down production completely, and Frigidaire sort of rolled out some of the stuff that they already had partially assembled. And the trucking industry just basically kind of stopped for a while. So anyway,
yeah, like a lot of people are really not aware of like the overall impact on the economy that like that COVID had, because so a lot of people like buy products and they're like, I feel good because this is made in America, and they don't realize that like almost like 90% of the raw materials in the world come from China. Right. So it's like, even if you're like, working with, like India or let's say you're just ordering like straight, like made in USA stuff, like half of the steel, half of the raw materials come from China. And so like when you have a raw material shortage, it's crazy. It impacts everything. So we definitely experienced that too with the AC thing. Like when we got our AC installed, it took us about 20 times as long to get a decent quote just because of the, like, again, shortage on parts. And
well, that's if you can get anybody to come out to your house.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So,
which is not a given apparently either, because we're going to have to redo our kitchen because of a bunch of other stuff that we found. And so I'm like talking to people and I'm like, you know, I've got a 2-month-old, a 3-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a nursing wife. And it's like, I can't have a construction area in my house for endlessly, you know, like we got to kind of get this done. And and they're just like, oh yeah, it'll be, you know, the back order on some of the stuff that we're looking at, like cabinets, they're like, yeah, that's like a 20 to 40 week. I'm like, 20 to 40 weeks. What kind of range is that?
So do they have you know, at this point, are they having to cut down the trees and actually
probably because there's a huge lumber shortage, because we used to get a lot of lumber from Canada. And we can't get stuff, or couldn't until recently, and nobody stopped building because they were all at home. And so people were like, oh, I'll still work on some stuff. And so the lumber supply that we have in the US still got eaten out. And so lumber is 5 times as expensive as it used to be.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's crazy.
That is complete insanity, dude. Wow. Well, so how's the video coming? You said you're close to done?
Yeah, I got a bunch of scenes done that were kind of taking forever. Probably one of the hardest scenes is like finished. And the semester ended and I got grading done. I've been grading like till like 3 or 4 in the morning every night after like working with contractors and everything during the day. And so the grading's about done.
So that's pretty time consuming on its own. Like, you know, just that end part of like a semester where you're having to like compile grades and all that is just, that's chaos, man.
Yeah, it's awful.
Dude, well, how's things otherwise? Other than the complete chaos.
Yeah, other than that, it's great. No, it's fine. Yeah, it's good, I guess. How about you guys? It's finally got hot here.
Oh, yeah?
Nothing like what you guys are experiencing, but like we're going outside and like, holy crap, it's in the 90s. This is crazy.
Yeah. So yeah,
and we don't have air conditioning.
Yeah, so it's definitely been like in the 90s for a while here,
right?
You know, verging the hundreds. But so far it's awesome because like this is the nice thing about, you know, we newly installed air conditioning, so it's kind of like that enjoyable moment where I haven't forgotten what a luxury this whole thing is.
Right.
I'm just like, it's weird. I keep going to like sections of the house, like expecting like there to be like a warm section and like evenly cool, which is really nice and like kind of makes living in the desert livable, and makes me wonder how we ever made it with like a swamp cooler, you know? Which by the way, there's like maybe 3 or 4 places in the US you could live on a
swamp cooler.
Yeah.
We had a swamp cooler growing up in California for the first part of my childhood.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, it was. I didn't know any better. I was a kid, you know. But but it was all right. But yeah, here I just buy window units and we just run them 24 hours a day. It's not ideal, but they don't really have air conditioning in Idaho, or at least in the part of Idaho I'm in.
Well, it seems like the houses are just made to like become like insanely hot at some point. And I mean, that seems like that, like a good heater would be like a more kind of necessary thing, I would think, right?
Yeah. It's I mean, you know, heat waves are not a thing that we have to really deal with that often. So,
all right. So I've been listening to a podcast lately that's really awesome.
Yeah,
And I've gotten like super hooked on it. It's called No Dogs in Space. And it is like this very comprehensive walk through like a lot of early punk rock in like a really comprehensive way where it gets into like the story of specific bands. It starts with like the Stooges, kind of goes on to like the Ramones, Suicide, like all these other bands. And all the way up to like where I'm at currently, which is like Joy Division, which is great. It's really fascinating and crazy. And like, I mean, you want like weird dramatic stories. It's like read the history of punk rock because it's like a drug fueled, just mad world, but it's also like fascinating and interesting and like a lot of good music came out of it. It's just I don't know. I like absolutely have been getting a kick out of it.
That's cool.
And also realize like I probably wouldn't have cut it on any of those tours as a young man because while I was a rebellious teenager, I don't know if I could have kept up.
you weren't super hardcore as they are. I mean, I feel like that scene is just crazy. Like, yeah.
Especially the early scene, you know, where I think like nobody had really, well, you know, maybe they had learned, but I feel like a lot of people hadn't really learned how to do it responsibly.
Do people do it responsibly?
Yeah, I guess rock and roll is kind of done irresponsibly anyway. But
I mean, is it rock and roll if it's, you know, responsible? I don't know.
Yeah,
I knew a dude who went off the rails and started touring and just destroyed his life doing that. And I've always just watched it being like, oh yeah, they're not kidding. they're not messing around. That is a crazy lifestyle.
Yeah,
I like my boring lifestyle compared to that stuff.
Yeah, I mean it usually also is like, you know, guys or women when they're like in their very early 20s, you know, sometimes late teens, you know, being given lots of money and opportunity to just be wild. And It's like, you know, honestly, I think a lot of people put in that position would do the same things.
Right.
Same irresponsible thing. And so it is one of those things of like, I definitely have had moments because I did play, you know, in bands and stuff when I was younger. And I definitely have had moments where I'm like, I'm so glad we never like, if we had ever gotten huge or like toured the world or something, I just imagine like how much damage that does. It's so nuts. But it's also super fun to read about. And I also think it's valuable to like, I don't know. It's one of the things I always liked about, I don't know if you had this, but like VH1, like when we were kids, like they used to have like those behind the music things.
Yeah. See, I was never as into music as I think you were. Not being a musician, and you know, I listened to music, but I didn't care who was playing the guitars and what band or, you know, what they were
So this was the thing.
Band or anything.
I used to watch that show and I could care less about the bands. Like I would watch it and it would be like a terrible, like Poison or something, you know, like a band I never liked. Like I always thought sucked, you know, like,
right.
And not, you know, no insult to people out there who might like Poison or whatever, but it's just not my kind of cup of tea. But the point is like, it wouldn't matter. It could be any band and it would just be fascinating. And I think people maybe could relate to this if they grew up in a similar era where it's like we didn't have like Netflix documentaries, you know, like so you were kind of just like a prisoner to like what you could rent or what you could watch on TV. And like the reason behind the music was so fascinating is it's like you just get these weird stories, and it's also because bands have to tour together, it's like these human beings kind of stuck in like a tour bus for like a year, you know, like in like terrible conditions, and just like seeing like what makes people crack, like what kind of builds the little family unit, like what sort of drama happens. It's super fascinating, but it's also super inspiring because the downside of all that stuff is like all the kind of chaos and madness. The upside of it is it really makes you realize like that there are rewards for risk, and I think if they're taken well, like if you take smart risks, like it's definitely worth it. And I think that as artists, like at least for me, like this is what I've been thinking about with this thing. And Corey, if I'm rambling too long, let me know.
No,
I'm not supposed to talk about
it's,
rambling.
It's the after party, man. It's all ramble.
That's right. And I that was a fair critique that I got. And I'm supposed to call myself on it whenever I do mention rambling because I shouldn't mention it. Anyhow, so basically just like there's something to be said for being able to like think that you can do a thing and like persist and actually do it. Right. And seeing people actually succeed at it, and then also seeing their failures when doing it, you can learn a lot from it. And so I think the great thing about the history of punk more than anything is like, I don't know, it's a movement where they couldn't play guitar as well as the guys that were like shredding in like these hair bands, you know, like they could shred. I mean, like there were a couple guys, like especially like the Damned, like their guitarist is like probably could play like Hendrix pretty easily. But most of those guitarists weren't as like technically skilled. They didn't have like the voices that were like these trained voices. They didn't have like big promotion behind them. They just kind of made it happen and found an avenue. And like it, you know, if an album couldn't come out, like if record labels weren't interested, they just started their own labels. Yeah. And it's like the Dead Kennedys, perfect example of that, where it's like you literally got refused by like every record label, and then they were just like, you know what, we're just going to put out our own stuff, and then like just continually kind of did their own thing, like in the face of a system that was kind of built to not work the way they were kind of working it. And to me, I always find like a ton of inspiration in that because, yeah, I mean, it's easy, I think, especially as we get older, to kind of forget that, like that there's opportunity and there's possibility. It's so easy to, I don't know. I feel like as artists, I know artists like this too, who like, you know, I've been at this for over 15 years now, you know, and there's artists who've been at it that long and they just kind of like, I don't know, get jaded or like depressed or like kind of like they see too much of the industry and just kind of go like, it's just not that great, you know? Yeah. And so like, I don't know, there's something about that's been really inspiring to me, just kind of going through that and remembering like, you know, this thing can be fun. Like art can be fun.
Well, nobody's making you do it.
Yeah, and also like no one can make you not do it. And I think that's the punk rock part. You know, where it's like and I really do think that's like just super important. So I don't know. I think I don't know. I've been finding it really inspiring and just fascinating as just like a nerd who likes hearing, you know, little stories and stuff. But this does come from like I'm also a person who like as a kid I used to read the liner notes and albums and be like, oh, okay. Like on this Pixies album, they're thanking this person and this person's connected to like this person. And then like, oh, it turns out that they're like connected to like Matt Sharp, who's in Weezer. And then, that's like connected to like Rachel and Petra Hayden and they're in That Dog. And then like, you kind of start seeing all these connections and people who hang out or are inspired by other people. And, I don't know. That's cool too, you know.
And that's the level of interest that I never got into. My dad was like that, but I just never.
I think you should give it a shot. Give the podcast a listen and let me know. Just one episode and let me know.
send me a link and I'll see. Yeah. But really, it's like honestly, when I like listening to music. When people start talking about music, the same part of my brain engages as if they're discussing like professional or college sports. I just don't care. You know, it's just like there's something about it where I'm like, it's cool that you're into that. And oh man, every time it happens, I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, no, I can understand that because it's like I think were I to do the podcast, it would be pretty boring. The hosts do a really good job of kind of keeping it a pretty fair balance, but it's mostly just like really fascinating stories about sort of the origins of this stuff, how the bands grew, like that kind of stuff. Mixed with like insane stories about Iggy Pop, which it's like it basically makes your stories about Scotland sound like daily life.
It's not inaccurate. Yeah, I don't know. I'll give it a shot.
My point being, like, in like any story about Iggy Pop, if you were to say like, and then a guy came in with a samurai sword, you'd be like, yeah, okay, yeah, I can see, yeah, right. that makes sense. Anyhow, I don't know. I'm rambling, but I found that really fascinating and cool. But I also have this tendency to, like, when I get really interested in something, kind of go down the rabbit hole, and I don't know.
You're reading a book on it recently, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is something I read about a lot anyway. You know, but yeah, it probably reignited my interest because I read one of Kim Gordon's books, and then was like, it you know, talked about a lot of like the start of Sonic Youth and stuff, and then I was like, I got to go down this crazy rabbit hole again.
Yeah, I freaking hate drawing animals, man.
Yeah,
the shapes of them are so off. I can never quite catch like what makes a fox look like a fox and a bear look like a bear. I feel like I'm just every time. I'll get there eventually, but like I'm not one of those artists that really enjoys animal stuff. That's what I like about insects.
Yeah.
Just make it creepy and weird and stiff, and then it looks like an insect. Like this looks like a baboon. I think I'm like baboon territory here.
I think it just might be the eyes are a little too close. That's what I see on there. But I think everything else is good. Although it's a fox, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then you're good. Yeah. I think that's a pretty good fox. Animals.
3 or 4 more before I figure it out.
Animals can be a beast to draw. I know, especially if they're riding in kayaks and they're a bear, and you're a detective trying to solve which bear stole whose kayak. Was this real? Was it not? Bears and kayaks coming in 2022. I have been like, so I'm kind of curious, like, what do you have, like, and this is an honest question, like, do you have time to kind of get into rabbit holes with like content or anything like that? Because like my memory of when Ben was you know, fairly little, was like a lot of nights of like no sleep where I'd have to kind of binge things, because it's like he wouldn't, like, he'd have times where he just wouldn't fall asleep any other way, or he'd have to feed like super late at night.
Yeah, we've got Roz pretty much sleeping through the night now.
Nice. That's not bad.
So it's not too bad. I mean, the downside is really that she's really needy in that stage where she just has to be held constantly. Like there's nothing wrong. She just wants somebody to hold her. So when she's awake, she's a lot of work. But yeah, she's not. And I mean, it wouldn't matter anyway because like she's still nursing. So there's really very little that I can do to help. I mean, I change her diaper and I hold her when she's not, you know, but like waking up at night and doing stuff, it's just, you know, she needs her mom who has the goods that she's interested in. So I am largely useless when it comes to that type of thing. With Scarlett and Maddox, they were both formula fed, so I was able to do stuff with them, but not Roz.
Got it. Yeah, it's hard to kick in when you don't have the food.
Yeah, right. Like I can't do nothing for you, man.
Yeah. So. Oh man. So the only reason I asked was I was just kind of curious. Have you gotten into any interesting, crazy rabbit holes, historical stuff, political stuff?
I just watched. either anger you or bore you, depending on your take on it. But I just watched the new Kevin Smith Netflix He-Man series.
So I watched the first episode, and I was like, meh. I mean, I don't know. I'm mixed on it because I didn't really think, even as a kid, like I didn't really think it was that well done of a cartoon.
It's a terrible show. I mean, it's like all the other 80s shows. It's not great. Honestly, I think the best part about that show is the character design, which never really translated into the toys, but like that's what I loved about it as a kid.
Yeah.
Was, you know, that, and they that's one of the first things that they ditched. They even started with people kind of dressed in similar ways, and then as soon as they possibly could manage it in the story, made them look completely different.
Huh. Okay. So I only saw the first one, and when I saw the first one, I totally got it, in the sense of, if I was trying to do something that kind of like honored the original show, you're trying to actually continue the story from like wherever it left off.
That's not this.
What's up?
That is not this.
Well, what I'm getting at is, actually, I kind of think it's the only way to do it, because where were you going to go with that story? Like
the 2002 reboot of it is legit.
Is it?
They do a really good job, because they dive into like the different cultures on Eternia and stuff, and you get to know like the bee people, and you get to know the underground. Like there's all these different races, and I didn't realize until then. I was like, oh, like these aren't like weird mutants, you know? Like there's not like one buzz-off guy.
Yeah,
he's just the best warrior of his tribe, of his species, and so they did a really good world building job of it there. This was like that Star Trek one where they're like, I don't know where to take this, so reset button. That's kind of what they did. I don't know, and it was interesting, but like I don't want to spoil it for anybody. So if you don't want it spoiled, I don't know, do whatever. You can stick around. Probably won't spoil anything, but there's not much to spoil. It's not a He-Man story. It's a Tila story. He-Man is in 2 of the 5 episodes. He's in the first part of the first episode, and he's in the last part of the 5th episode.
Okay, so I haven't even seen the 5th yet, but what I'm curious about is, like, first off, like, we haven't seen the full thing yet, right? So it very much could be like a setup for like a return story. I doubt it, though.
Well, Kevin Smith, after the backlash, is now promised. I was talking to Mike Emirates about this earlier. Is now promising there's a ton of He-Man in part 2, guys. Ton of He-Man in part 2.
Well, what's funny is there very much might be. I think people are kind of forgetting. I don't know. Like, I haven't read any of the backlash from it, and like I said, I watched literally episode 1, but I didn't see episode 1 as like a necessary finality. It just seemed like a thing to make there be some stakes to the story and make an interesting arc out of it.
Yeah. After watching 1, I was like, okay.
Yeah. But
it could be interesting.
I haven't watched any of the rest. I will say I like Kevin Smith a lot, full disclosure. So I'm biased in the sense of, like, I always try to like Kevin Smith stuff, because I'd say like Mallrats is probably in my favorite movies of all time. It's up there, and I know it's stupid. I just absolutely love Mallrats. I think it's one of the funniest movies ever made. And it's so dumb. It's like stupid funny, you know, but I love it because of that.
Okay, here's my one critique, because I'm not one of those guys that's like, I'm going to get super upset over this, whatever. My one critique is what Masters of the Universe has going for it is just like blatant, really obvious characters, names with cool character designs. That's what they have going for it. They're like, let's make like a guy and he's like covered in moss, you know? And it's like, oh, should we call him like Swamp Thing? No, call him Moss Man. And we'll make another guy who's like part B. Oh, what should we call him? Buzz Off. You know, it's like, this guy's a snake. What's his name? King Hiss. Like, it's like the most. And then it gives you even more obvious, like Ram Man. And like, it's just whatever they do, and then the word man after it. So And then normally I would hate that, but then the character designs are so fun.
Yeah.
And then so that's what's cool about it as a kid. That's what I liked about it as a kid. And so I was like, okay, I'm into it. I'm cool. Let's do this. Right. And then like Tila, who's got a cool looking thing going on, with like the Eternia armor and whatever. She's like, I quit. And now she's just like normal, basic looking, boring sword woman. That's what her design turns into for the rest of the series. It's like, all right. And I like Sarah Michelle Gellar too. Like I'm into a lot of the people that are involved in it. And so I'm willing to give it a shot for part 2, but it was weird.
I'm curious, because like I said, I saw the first and I kind of liked it. The only thing I really want to see, and I hope this happens like at some point in the 5 episodes, I feel like if you're doing He-Man, you need to get really heavy metal. Like you need to get just ridiculously heavy metal about it. I think if you do that, you're good.
What do you like? Are you talking the comic or are you talking like the music?
I'm talking both the comic and the music. I mean, you should get kind of over the top and just enjoy the fact that it's a big, ridiculous barbarian story, and fantasy.
And I completely agree. And instead of doing that, it felt like they were kind of embarrassed of the source material instead of just like embracing it.
And so I don't know. Could that be a setup to get you ready for the source material to come back and be like, boom, I'm back? I don't know.
There's literally a scene where they're like, there's this flashback where Tila is telling a He-Man story, and then He-Man says one of his corny one-liners and does his He-Man thing, and then it cuts back to the people that are listening to the story, and they're like, what a dork. I can't believe he just says a one-liner like that afterwards. I know, he's kind of obvious. And then they moved on. I was like, that's the whole show, man. The whole show is this big muscle-bound guy punching Skeletor in the face and then saying something stupid. Like, that's it. That's all. That, like, anyway, so it felt to me like every comic book movie before, like in the 90s, where they're kind of like, we're kind of embarrassed that this is a comic book, so we're sort of going to make it, but we're also going to like try to do something to it to make it not like the comics. It just felt like they're embarrassed of the source material.
Okay, because I only saw the first episode, and what I saw seemed really authentic to the original cartoon, and just had a very big twist to it, where I was like, "Whoa, that's kind of yeah." But I mean, it like the character designs didn't seem super different. In fact, I was kind of surprised because they went like pretty old school about it,
super accurate.
So I don't know. Like I'll have to watch the rest now. The only problem I have is I got a little bored. Like I started watching episode 2 and I got a little sleepy like 10 minutes into it. I was just like, I don't know if I care about He-Man. Like I never really was a huge He-Man kid.
Right.
The toys, like, and this is going to offend a lot of people who grew up and loved He-Man. I might have just been like a year or so older. But like the toys were kind of stiff. Like they were great character designs, but they were like really stiff, rigid toys. And like
I hate the 80s toys. They were awful.
Yeah, but then you had like G.I. Joes, which were awesome, except for the stupid rubber band that would snap, But other than that, like they were great. They were like you could move their arms and like move them around. So I think of like the whole toy trend thing. I was more of like a G.I. Joe, maybe Transformers kind of kid, And then He-Man, I'd watch He-Man because it was animated, like
right.
And the commercials were cool,
Yeah.
And Skeletor. I mean, Skeletor, like, I think if there's anything from the first one that I'm sad about, that might be it.
Skeletor might be the most 80s character ever.
Yeah, and his voice is great. He's just a
giant bodybuilder in a loincloth with a floating skull head.
And with a high-pitched, like,
high-pitched voice, and he's perfect.
Yeah, he's great. And he's emotional. Like really emotional, like really sensitive bad guy,
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow. So Gary said I agree with that take. And And Gary said, I liked He-Man for exactly that reason they intended. The figures were fun looking. Yeah, I mean, like, also, like, you know, the castle was cool. And again, it's like high fantasy for kids, you know, which is
they made fun of
super
the
great.
castle. They made fun of the castle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
At one point in time, they run into Grayskull, the actual warrior Grayskull that the castle was built for.
Uh-huh.
And they were like, dude, I've been to your castle. And he literally is like, it's kind of a lame castle. I don't really like it. I'm like, dude, it's like the coolest castle that's ever been designed in the history. It's a giant green stone skull. It's so rad. And
to
he's
be
like,
fair,
stupid.
I mean, if you think of the toy, that was pretty much every kid's response where they're like, I need that castle. And then they'd get the castle and be like, I don't know.
I mean, you and I were both poor as kids, but I was pretty poor, and so I never got the castle.
Yeah, I had friends with it.
So I always would have been down for the castle. But anyway, it was fine. It was.
You know what's funny? I think you probably had a similar experience because you and I probably didn't have a lot of like 80s toys because we both grew up, you know, not so great or so well off. Right. I always had like a rich friend at school or something. Like there was always that one kid. Usually it was a kid who was like an only child. And that's not a diss because like my son is an only child, and are you kidding me? He's gonna have way more toys than he would with siblings. You know, that's just the nature of being an only child. But I remember going over to a friend's house and they had the G.I. Joe space shuttle.
Holy crap.
And the He-Man castle. They had the full Voltron. It was this absurd thing where it's like I was really surprised they didn't have the full G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, which was like legendary at the time.
Right.
But yeah, it was weird. And the weird thing was because they had all of it, like they just kind of treated it like, nah, whatever. That's the G.I. Joe space shuttle. And I'm like, it's the G.I. Joe, it's the space shuttle, which I still to this day think NASA ripped off for their like comp for what they were going to replace the space shuttle with. If you ever look it up,
that happens all the time, man.
Yeah.
James Bond invented a ton of stuff that we use today before anybody ever thought of it.
In fact, I want to just show that. I'm gonna look up the G.I. Joe space shuttle.
You're gonna get a copyright strike from NASA.
Yeah. Well, for the G.I. Joe space shuttle, because they literally ripped it off for their design.
Okay, here's Gary's take. It's weird when studios jump on a property in theory because it's an instant audience and then make a bunch of choices that basically undermine that. And that's kind of what I was talking to Mike about today. I'm cool with things changing. I'm cool with doing stuff. Like and a lot of the choices that they made felt like, you know, they're trying to bring some diversity into it, which, you know, in the 80s was a huge problem. Like they're all white dudes and the whole Smurfette syndrome was rife throughout every 80s property. Like here's the one girl amongst the 99 guys. That happened all the time. But instead of doing that in a cool way, I don't know who the audience is for this. It's not children. They swear in it. And it's kind of boring for kids. So it's not like when I was 5 and I was watching it, you know, and my 3 to 11-year-olds today would be like, yeah, that's cool. So it's not for kids. It's not for original fans because they did a bunch of stuff that made it not for original fans. So I don't know who they're making it for, except for maybe like Twitter. They're making it for like whiny Twitter. That's kind of what it felt like.
Okay, so I just want you guys to look at this screen and tell me which one is the G.I. Joe space shuttle. It's hard to tell, right? It's hard to tell because NASA engineers got lazy and were just like, that's a great shuttle design. Telling you.
Oh man.
Anyhow, I don't know. I'm mixed about it because I really don't want to rush to judgment in the sense of like, dude, it's like a 10 episode series, right? So what happens if like at the end they did this as like a hero's journey, like to build up like He-Man so that you like really feel it as him being a really essential character, which you wouldn't if you
I
didn't
don't
have
even,
that lead at the beginning. I'm just
no, I
saying.
don't even care. I don't even care that He-Man's not in it. My problem is, I think probably part of marketing, right? When
Yeah.
you show He-Man in every single thing, let me show. This is the coolest piece of marketing I've ever seen. Mainly, 'cause I'm really into toys, and stop motion is really cool.
They also re-released all the 80s toys from what I understand.
Yeah,
At least they look pretty darn like close to the originals, because
yeah, I mean 80s toy.
I thought I was like kind of tripping out the last time I was at a Target, like looking for, my son's like super into Sonic the Hedgehog right now.
Yeah.
And so we were looking for Sonic toys, and then I saw this whole rack with like Castle Grayskull and like all the toys, like, but they haven't changed. It's like the exact same mold. I was like, oh my gosh.
Okay, watch the stop motion right here.
Oh yeah, I have seen this.
26 seconds of stop motion is cooler than all 5 episodes of the show. I would just watch this. I would watch 2.5 hours of this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
like,
like, again.
If this is the marketing, right? The 2 coolest characters in the thing.
Yeah.
Though I think Buzz Off and Man at Arms are way cooler than He-Man himself. These 2 characters are in about 15% of the show.
Yeah.
But they're in all of the marketing.
Yeah.
Anyway. And I still think,
again, I'm just saying,
don't wuss out and give him a brown furry loincloth. Give him this full-on pink furry loincloth. Anyway,
I could see that.
I just love that they're like, hey, you know what we should do? We should just make the manliest thing we can. Just totally ripped dudes. One guy will have a skull. And then somebody else is like, yeah, and we'll just make it really cool. Like, make one of them dress total in pink, and the other one could be total in purple.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh my gosh, I forget. Like, I think it was like on the Toys That Made Us or something, and they were talking about how Battle Cat kind of came to be.
Uh-huh.
And it was literally like a leftover toy mold for something else. And then they were like, well, we have a bunch of these, so if we add this like harness thing, he could like ride a cat. And they're like, yeah, and we could save the mold cost. Like, so, I don't know. It's weird because I'm mixed on it, right? Like, I feel like I get it, because I remember feeling fury when I saw the trailer for the G.I. Joe movie. I literally saw it, and I remember sitting there, and somebody, I think I might have went to see this, like a movie with Kevin or something back when I lived in Portland. Yeah. And I don't know if this was Kevin, but I think it might have been him who just yelled out, like, not my G.I. Joe, like, just really loud, like, just impulsively, because it's just like, that's terrible. I get it. I mean, Transformers, I felt disgust when I saw like those weird mandible jaws they gave the characters. You know?
Yeah.
And then when Bumblebee became a different car, and I was like, you're supposed to be like a bug, dude. Like, anyhow, I get it, but I mean, I also feel like I don't know. I mean, if you watch the original cartoons, a lot of these cartoons are terrible. Like,
they're super corny. Yeah.
I mean, like G.I. Joe, it's so hard to watch. Like, it does not hold up. Like,
right.
And like, honestly, like, a lot of them were made to sell toys.
And here's my problem. Here's my problem with He-Man. I'm totally bought in. I am a full-on consumer dude when it comes to, like, I made this thing to sell toys. I'm like, good. That's awesome. I love that business model. So go with that. Like, that's what every time you do something like that, and you're like, character design first, just make something that looks super bad and we'll sell a ton of it. And then, I don't know, we'll come up with some story in the background. Even though that's horrible, I don't care. I love it. This show, everyone looks so boring. Like, after the first episode, when everybody's like, screw this, I quit. And they all go be basic peasants.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, they all threw away all their cool armor. They all like retire. Everybody gets pissed and leaves. And then they're like, okay, so what are all the peasants wearing? Great. And then so all the action figures are like, here's Tila, the coolest, chick warrior that's ever blah, 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 in peasant clothing. And it's like, and she shaved half her head. It's like, come on, it's so boring.
All right.
It's just like basic. It's like basic human doll. It's not like a cool action figure.
All right. Well, I will have to watch more episodes because, like I said, I'm at a disadvantage because I've only seen the first episode. So I don't know.
I almost just want to tell you not to watch it.
Yeah, I mean,
just wait for part 2 to come out because.
But I will say, I will say, if it's like a hero's journey arc of any kind, it's gonna have a down point where, like, I mean, like for instance, if they are gonna up the costumes and stuff, the costumes won't mean anything unless they come from peasant clothes. Just like He-Man doesn't mean anything unless he's a scrawny dude, and then he turns into like, by the power of Grayskull, and then he becomes like, the badass He-Man, right? Like, I have the power. Like, that only means something because he's transforming. If he were that all the time, it'd be a pretty boring story. So right. Like, I will say, like, from what I'm hearing as criticism, some of that might be a master storyteller. I will also say Kevin Smith has his wins and losses. Like, he, like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is a terrible movie. Like, it is a terrible movie. It's funny at points, but it is terrible. There's a couple properties that Kevin Smith's like just, I don't know. He's tanked before. So
this is what Tila looks like for like 92% of the show.
Yeah.
Can you pick her out of a crowd? Because
no,
not really.
No.
I mean, Eva Lynn looks cool the whole time because they didn't really change anything with her. Man at Arms at times looks all right, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, here's the toys. Can I get these like bigger? Open a new tab.
I agree though, like, and also bringing back a little bit of the color to it. Like, I mean, I agree. Like, half the aesthetic of He-Man is like cheesy, like neons and stuff. I mean, even Skeletor's got like some blues and purples. Like, right. He's not just like a bland skeleton. So I agree with that. That would be interesting.
So like these,
but like I said, maybe it's just like, maybe this is just the calm before the explosion of like color and cool costumes and epic powers.
I'm not ruling that out. I'm just saying these 4 characters are the ones that come up when you search for like Motu Revelation toys. And 3 of these 4 are not, like, I don't want to give anything away, but they're not in 4 of the 5 episodes.
Yeah.
So it's like,
well, maybe they're in the last half. I'm just saying.
I don't know. Maybe it's possible, but
it could be. I will say, I like, so here's one thing I do like about the whole thing. And keep in mind, I have not seen these episodes. I'm not the fan base that it's appealing to.
I like that you're playing devil's advocate so hard, though, right
now. Oh, yeah, I will. Awesome. But one other thing that's going to happen, like, to me, is like, and I think it's hilarious. I do like the fact that Kevin Smith the whole time was so tight-lipped about what was going to happen. And he's just like, man, are you kidding? You want He-Man? He's going to be in like every episode. You're going to have like He-Man everywhere. It's He-Man, He-Man, He-Man. And then what happened? I don't know. There is a part of me that thinks that's kind of funny. But and then he calmed fans. He's like, no. Don't worry. He-Man's everywhere. It's going to be all about He-Man.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. There is a part of me, maybe a trolley part, that's like, meh, this is kind of funny.
Well, like, look at, oh, yeah, it's the trolley part. But, like, do you want to enjoy it or do you want to troll people? Because look at Roboto here. He's a giant robot guy who has, like, transparent stomach that has gears everywhere. It's, like, one of the coolest action figures because he actually did something, like most of them didn't. You twist him at the waist and his gears would turn. And they put him in a poncho. Just put right here. We'll just stick him in a poncho, right? This happens once for like 5 seconds and then it's over. Mm-hmm. She's not in it for at all. It's just like every piece of Mark. This character, I think 3.5 seconds was on screen. 3.5 seconds, maybe. Anyway, yeah. Like, you know why I'm not seeing Tila and these characters in action figures right now? because they're so boring. Like Gary says, "Mommy, mommy, buy me man in tunic." Oh, it's just anyway. It was fine. I didn't hate it. I wanted to give it a chance, but like, look how cool Man at Arms is. Man at Arms, dude's super cool. Why can't I get like a Man at Arms story? Right?
Yeah. Well,
or like in the first episode. So this isn't giving anything away. They make Tila Man at Arms. Right? She raises through the ranks and becomes like captain of the guard. And then doesn't get like, oh, well, let's give her like a cool orange and green and blue armor plated costume. That would be awesome. Nope. Tunic. That's what she gets. A tunic. Anyway. Whatever.
Yeah. I don't know, man.
I
don't know. I mean, I get it, but I guess like I've had so much of my childhood pillaged that
and I'm not
He-Man wasn't a big one. Like
I'm not one of those guys that's like you ruined
like G.I. Joe was one that hurt me.
See, I don't
physically. And G.I. Joe was like terrible. Again, in retrospect, it was a horrible cartoon. Like
oh yeah.
But
though I think the twins, when one got hurt and the other felt it, that blew my mind as a kid. That might have been the coolest thing that ever happened on TV.
Yeah.
It's not hard to please 7-year-olds, I don't think.
Yeah, it's also like, I mean, it's fascinating to those of us who don't have twins. My wife has a twin, and I think for her, she's just like, yeah, that's true. Because they do have a connection, I'm telling you.
So
but
anyway,
yes.
not as cool as the history of punk rock, but
I like it. That was a good rant, and it was interesting. I'm fascinated by it. I like, and what's funny is I'm glad I saw at least one episode, because I do like Kevin Smith. So that's where I'm at. Is like I will give it a shot because, 5 out of 10 times, like Kevin Smith will nail it, and I like him when he does.
I'll tell you something. Kevin Smith to me really represents like this like indie vibe of like stick it to the man and screw corporate culture and let's like tear down your idols, that type of thing.
Okay.
A little bit, right? At least like, I mean, he mocks his own movies. He doesn't make blockbuster movies. He talks about his movies being like, whatever. Am I wrong? Am I off there? You're like,
no, that's pretty accurate. But the thing is, I'd say at this point, he's pretty mainstream. I mean,
well, yeah. And my point was, this is the most corporate shill thing I think you could have done. Like,
oh yeah, he shills a lot though. I mean, to be fair, like I like Kevin Smith, but he's a shill. Like, I mean, it's not the first or the last time he will shill. But I don't know. I gotta see it. Because I did enjoy the first episode. I thought it was fun.
Gary's saying G.I. Joe Resolute was a really good series. Did you see that one?
No, I haven't.
Right.
I'll have to check it out. I did like was it IDW who was doing the comics? Those were pretty cool, actually.
I'll tell you a couple things that would hurt because I don't care about 80s cartoons. They were all garbage, and I enjoyed them because I was a stupid young child.
Yeah.
And so you could do whatever you want with them. Like when the Smurf stuff came out, Neil Patrick Harris is running around in New York with a bunch of like blue, whatever. I don't care. I tried rewatching the Smurfs because I really enjoyed the Smurfs as a kid. It is the worst thing to listen to as an adult. It's just a bunch of screaming falsetto men trying to act like. Anyway, it sounds horrible, and I couldn't make it through a single episode. But I'll tell you, if they did like a really awful Samurai Champloo or a really terrible like Neon Genesis Evangelion, like a live action version of either of those, or I'll tell you one that really was offensive: the live action M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh yeah,
Airbender.
It shouldn't even be named. Yeah, that was so bad. That was the first movie that I had fallen asleep in And I wasn't tired when I went to it.
Was it during one of the fight sequences where you couldn't follow the action and you're just
100%.
like, oh, I might as well just be asleep now because this doesn't make any sense.
It was like mid movie, big Fire Nation battle, just poof, fell asleep.
Yep.
Great costumes. The actors weren't bad. I mean, they should have probably diversified the cast, but still, it was just like, it was horrible. It was like the most boring film I've ever seen. And they tried to, they botched it. And it's one of the best cartoons ever done, for kids.
There is a podcast that I started listening to of Rufio, who plays Zuko.
I thought you were going to talk about like Rufio from like the other Rufio.
Yeah, Rufio from Hook. He's the same voice actor.
Oh, no way! I had no idea.
Rufio in Hook is the guy who voices Zuko.
Oh, I did not know this.
It's that actor whose name I can't remember.
That's cool.
And then the actress who voices is it Kara? The it's not Kara. It's I don't know. I haven't watched it all the way through, but it's the one that comes after the series that comes after.
Oh, Korra.
Korra, right. So it's Korra and Zuko doing a podcast behind the scenes about The Last Airbender. And they had like the creators on in the second episode, and it was really cool. So they were talking about like, what's it like to be two white guys making an homage to Japanese culture and stuff like that. It was pretty fascinating how they did it. And what they were talking about. That's a good podcast so far.
Nice. That's awesome.
Okay, that one's terrible. That one's okay. Let's look at this one.
All right.
Okay.
I am getting pretty close to wrapped. Let me see if I've got this on my crazy business here. With the I'm doing this very boring process. It's boring. I'd imagine on Instagram or for people following.
I love right now that everything you're posting is like, here's a shot of my file folders again.
Yeah, exactly. It's just basically, but it's a counting game because everything after this process will be awesome.
Yeah.
Full of lots of arts and stuff. But yeah, let's see. Just making sure I've got this closed.
All right, so I'm going to go with this guy, and I'm going to he looks a little sad. I need him to not look sad. I'm going to give him like angry eyes. Down a little bit and up. Yeah, so this is the fox pirate that is going to attack the people in the car that are singing in the car.
Yeah, I'm excited about the fox pirate. Like I know you're saying like, oh, I don't know about drawing foxes and stuff, but I'm excited. I think that fox pirate's going to be pretty awesome, dude.
He's got an eye patch, so he's got that going for him. And he's going to have a pet flying squirrel as well.
I just caught a tense problem that I did not catch in my script. Everything's in past tense. Suddenly I said, they start walking away instead of started. Can you believe that?
Nope.
Horrific error.
You've lost faith in me as a reader now.
I know. Be careful, guys. When you're reading my work, catch those tense shifts.
Don't meet your heroes, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's see. How would a fox wear an eye patch? This is one of those things that you never think about until you try to do it, like how hard it is to give.
Yeah, animals and costumes. Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, I forgot. They're not humanoid at all.
You could always cop out and do the really bad cartooning where it's like where it's just like a pretty much like a face with like a fox painted on it, but it's just a human being. It's like, look, I'm anthropomorphic and I have gloves. Like with human hands.
Oh man.
But yeah,
no,
doing
that's
the real cartooning is tough.
That's another thing is he's gonna have. Did you see Saki got a lifetime achievement award at the Eisners?
What?
Stan? Yeah, Stan.
Stan Sakai?
Yeah, Sakai. Yeah, I
nice.
don't know his name. I always see it written. Yeah, he got lifetime achievement, as did Neil Gaiman.
Both very worthy of that. Yeah, dude. Usagi. This is where I'm gonna mispronounce the hell out of it. My wife will punch me in the face. But Usagi Yojimbo is like amazing. Yeah. All right.
Sense, right? Hold on, you can't see it. Tell me. I feel like most of this face is fur. So like if they actually had like a band, it'd like pull the fur in right there. Pretty sure that would work. Just gonna adjust this part of it. No, not that part.
I think that works.
And I'm gonna do the stupid thing that I always do where I make it too complicated because I want him to turn his head, but he's got a muzzle, and so he's going to turn his head, and all of this section is going to be in like a fake 3D thing.
I love it though, because I like that you're challenging yourself with stuff like that, and it's going to make it, I think, a million times better. And you're going to get better as you do it because that's a complicated turn to make happen. And I think the more you do that, like the less complicated it will get because you'll be like, oh, okay, now I can do that.
Toolkit. Yeah, there's this guy I've followed for years, EB Films, and I'm totally gonna rip off something I saw him do, where he just has like layers of fur that are like this, and they're just like concentric layers of fur, but because they don't have any solid edges, he just has them go like this to the edges, and then the other way, but it's all kind of a fuzzy edged layer. And so it just looks really cool. He did it with a polar bear.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
it's kind of a rad idea.
Yeah. I'm gonna see if I can steal it. It's basically like you do like a topographical map of the snout. He did it not on the bear's face, but on the body.
So like from a certain extent, this is going to look like the Joy Division cover, like with like all the little fractals and stuff on it.
The what? I gotta look that up. What is it?
The classic, like the iconic Joy Division cover.
Is Joy Division a band?
Yeah. They did like Love Will Tear Us Apart. Yeah, they're a band. They so New Order was like them without Ian Curtis, the singer. But anyhow, Joy Division did this. I'll find it, but it's like the iconic, like one of the most iconic like band like covers, like album covers or gig posters. Let's see. It's actually pretty good. I think it's the. Yeah, I mean, you've definitely seen this as like a T-shirt or something, right? Thing?
No.
It just looks like that.
Okay.
It's like the I forget what it is. It's like the pattern of like a blast of energy or something. Huh. And I think it's like starlight or something to that extent. But it's the magnetic field of it. But it's really cool. It's a cool. Definitely a cool. Yeah. And then people have riffed on this and made other designs where like those, sound waves or whatever will become, like a landscape or, something.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fun times. I was just joking that if you zoom in on the snout, it would look like that album cover.
Yep. That was totally my intention the whole time because I'm cool enough to know all about that. I think you were way cooler than I was.
No. It depends when. If you go back far enough, one of us played sports, Corey, and it wasn't me.
It was on sports teams. Playing is a different story.
Yeah. I got you though. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think there are entire swaths of like different music things that I completely missed. And then some that I got like super interested in. I think just like anyone, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
It's weird.
but
It's weird back in the 90s, 80s and 90s, like it's weird how you found out about music because
yes,
there were no algorithms to recommend things. It was just like people would say, "Have you listened to this?"
you
You're like, "No."
needed you needed like a cool older brother or like a friend with a cool older brother or like a hookup at a record shop. You know, with like
Yeah.
somebody would be like, no, kid, you like that, you'd like this, you know.
I mean, I
Um,
remember Megadeth Countdown to Extinction blowing my mind. Like I specifically remember listening to High Speed Dirt on that album
mm-hmm.
and just thinking there's a band that is wrote an entire song about a guy falling to his death and we just get his inner monologue. And for some reason, like that level of insanity was just like, you know, because like my dad listened to a little bit of punk and a little bit of, you know, kind of indie, what we would call now like alternative, you know, 70s. And, you know, he was into a lot of that stuff. That wasn't like super mainstream, but like he wasn't into like, you know, punk. But anyway, so I even growing up, like all the classic rock stuff, I'm not into the same classic rock stuff of like the people our age who listen to stuff with their dad. You know, it's like my dad listened to like, you know, random stuff. But
Yeah, I mean, like my dad wasn't really super into heavier stuff. I think the heaviest he got was like the Beatles or like
okay,
Credence, you know.
yeah,
Um, and then like, you know, he was like really into like weird jazz, like but like cool jazz, like Blue Note, you know, era. And then he was definitely into like Simon and Garfunkel, you know, like
right,
so it wasn't like yeah, I think for me, like a lot of it was just friends and stuff. And then like, you know, like I had like when I started getting into punk, it was like most kids where it's just like I illegally was not allowed to get this album because it was called the Sex Pistols.
right,
And I was like, I had it on tape and was like, yeah, I got it. Like I bought it at like a warehouse and then I like hid it because I couldn't like, I mean, just the cover was like so saucy. I couldn't let my parents know I had this album. And then from there, it's like you start kind of digging and like asking friends at school, like who are kind of more hip to it. And they'd be like, oh, well, here's the catalog of like, you know, this label. And then you'd order like like back then, like samplers were huge too. So you'd like
right.
order a sampler and then be like, I like this and I like this. And like start digging. And then like you'd look in liner notes and be like, oh, they mentioned this band. I wonder what they sound like. But
Well, that was
yeah,
like
it is a mystery.
Vans Warp Tour in like late 90s, early 2000s. They'd have those sampled CDs.
Mm-hmm.
Those were great.
Yeah.
They'd like hand them out at like, you know, like Zoomies or Hot Topic or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. And then labels would have their own, you know. So like even with like, you know, when I got like heavy into underground and stuff, like I still remember my ska phase where like I had to order from Two Tone and you'd just send a stamp like to this weird address. And then like, you know, 2 months later you get this weird like photocopied catalog. And
Right.
then you just send money in the mail and just hope your album arrived, you know, like it's really weird. And it like, you know, and again, like those scenarios, you definitely had to get the sampler because you don't want to like, you know, wait like a month or a couple weeks or whatever for like an album that sucks and looks cool, you know?
Yeah.
So you'd be like, okay, I'll just get the two-tone sampler. And then from there, you're like, okay, now I know these guys, you know? It was like that with like everybody at the time, but it's yeah, it is such a weird time to think back on where you were kind of restricted based on like the music stores in your area.
Which
Yeah,
we
they
had
just
0 in my town.
yeah, I mean, same here. So it's like we had like maybe one like warehouse music, like but we didn't have any like hip record shops around here. So Yeah, it was a weird thing. It's fascinating how people used to discover music. I envy, and then I also don't envy people now, because I think there is something about that era where it's like at that time when I like found the Clash, it was like amazing, you know. And I'm not talking, you know, like Train in Vain was played on the radio and stuff, but it was like, you know, when you get those like the deep cut Clash stuff, you know, like we're like listening to like the Sandinista album and you're like, whoa, what the hell? Like, this is amazing. That was so cool, but you'd like really connect to those bands because like when you connected to music, it was something you really discovered. It's interesting now where it's like, you know, today, if you were like, I want to hear bands that sound like this, you can put it into an algorithm and it'll just feed it to you. It's interesting. And so I think probably like the younger generation now is probably like way more hip to like the history of movements, but I don't know if they're as connected. I'm sure they are, but it seems like there would be like a severing of connection there. Kind of like with indie comics. It used to be really hard to get a hold of certain indie comics, you know? So when you did, you'd like really connect, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Some random kind of thing, but something I think about sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to think about like the difference.
Yeah, I mean,
I think my, you know, my dad would say the same thing, you know, like, you know, like I don't have the same connection he did because it was even harder, you know, back in his day to do it.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you know, like, yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. It's crazy to think about, but I don't know. I mean, you know, like I guess you're right. You're right because like your dad they didn't really have the option to even really tape a lot of those things, like, you know. Right. So it's like, you know, cassettes were like a thing from like more our generation, and then, you know, kind of on. So. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that overlaps because you are so much older and have so much more wisdom than I do, Corey.
Yep. A month of it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, who knows? In a month, I'll probably be talking about it with much more wisdom.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know. Back in my day, though, Josh, it was so much harder than when you went through things. So, yeah.
But I do love the story of like music discovery. I mean, there's some things that like luckily my sisters had good taste. So like the Smiths, you know, that's something I heard because my sisters listened to it, and then I like borrowed it. It was like, what is this? This is really cool, you know?
Yeah.
And then there's stuff I found on my own, and then there's regretful stuff, and then there's stuff that I really dig that's terrible, like Tom Jones. And I don't even have my parents to blame for that one. Like my family wasn't into Tom Jones. I remember just getting like some Tom Jones albums in like a dollar bin because I just thought they looked really funny. Because it's like, I mean, it's, you know, they're ridiculous album covers. And just I fell in love with it. And I think originally like very sarcastically, and then after a while I was like, no, this Tom Jones is badass. So I don't know, man. You know, music's fun like that, though. Like
I liked him in Empire Records.
Yeah, he's excellent, man. But I'll also say, like, I definitely had that moment with metal. I think everybody did, you know. But like you were just describing that, but it's like I definitely had that with like the first time I heard Slayer. I was like, oh, this is like, and I remember like, I think the first time I listened to it, I literally thought I was like opening a portal to hell. I like felt guilty. I was like, oh no, like I've just released the demons. Like, you know, like it was kind of a magical but dangerous thing, you know?
Yeah, it was funny.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know. I think every generation thinks this, but I often think, I just don't think music is like that anymore. Like, you know, it's very hard to find the super rebellious stuff. Because, I mean, not hang out, but I am around college students, you know, and like they talk about some of the stuff they're listening to. I'm like, that is milk toast guys.
Yeah.
Straight up. Like everybody's into Taylor Swift. I cannot for the life of me understand why. She's fine. She's whatever. It's like one of the most bland, basic.
Yeah.
It's like the least offensive thing you could think of, if you're like, it's like a pepperoni pizza. It's like most people are like, yeah, it's fine. But like everybody, like, people are getting tattoos of T Swift and stuff. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Anyway, it's just funny.
I was going to show you my new tattoo, but now I'm not going to. It's just like T Swift. Oh man!
I dare you to get a Taylor Swift tattoo.
Oh, right.
Oh,
right, 20 years younger.
I think that would be the biggest punk rock move you could make is get a T Swift tattoo.
I think I would get a Tom Jones tattoo before I got a Taylor Swift one.
I
might get a Tom Jones.
That would be pretty legit. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I don't know. I listen to some stuff and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this out. Everybody's talking about it. Like, there's got to be something to it. And then I tried it out and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so boring.
Yeah.
And then I remember that the general population has pretty boring taste.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. The other thing is I kind of think a lot of what's good, kind of like on the Indie Review Show, where it's like, I mean, occasionally we're going to have like something that a lot of people know, like
sure.
A Daniel Klaus, like, isn't he's indie, but he's like, there've been movies made of him, like of his work. Like Ghost World was a pretty huge movie for an indie. So it's not like we're digging deep into the crevices of underground or whatever. But so there's a variety of stuff like that, but then total books that like nobody's read and like everybody should read, or books that we assume are huge and like are still underground. And I think that's kind of probably what's happening with music. For me, it's more just like, I don't have the time to kind of explore underground as much as I used to. Yeah. I'm sure I'm trying to be sure and confident that there's probably really good underground hip hop and rock like happening now, and it's better than the crap we're hearing on the radio. I 100% think that has to be the case, because there's always kids that are just like, this stuff sucks, we're going to make our own stuff,
Right.
I think maybe it's just that, where it's like just kind of being clued in. So for me now, it's like I'm more like what I've been getting into is kind of digging back into the history of things and catching stuff I missed, so yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, where it's like, that to me is way more interesting, where I'm like, oh, okay, I missed this band from like 1979 or whatever, like I missed these bands. Like, to me, that's way more fun than a lot of like kind of discovering newer stuff. I don't know, maybe that just happens,
My favorite thing now, because now I love it, because I just find great stuff. But like, my favorite thing now is just finding something weird and then going down the Spotify recommend rabbit hole. Like, some people were saying Spotify's algorithm sucks. Dude, for me, Spotify, it has me dialed in, because I have the most eclectic taste. I mean, if it's not country music, I could be into it. That's about the one thing, and it's fine. Like, I understand, there's nothing wrong with country. I just hate it personally. Well, I hate everything about it. But like,
to be fair, there's something wrong with modern country for sure. But
modern, old,
each their own taste.
Yeah, I just whatever. But anything else, I could like hip hop, rap, punk, metal, indie, chick rock. Like, I run the gamut of of stuff. But lately I've been finding some stuff that I'm like, oh, this is so bizarre. For example,
have you been listening to that song "How Bizarre" just on loop, Corey?
It should be.
You're like, this is so bizarre.
Have you heard of Ninja Sex Party?
No, but that sounds awesome.
I won't recommend it because of the swearing. But if you don't care about swearing, you get I think it's called Danny Don't You Know. One of my students recommended it to me when I was looking for music video recommendations.
Okay.
I'm doing a music video. So hold on. I'm just going to send you a link.
Okay, I'll check it out.
But you have to watch the music video of it. All
right.
It is, and then I went down this. Okay, so one of their albums, it's kind of like listening to a D&D campaign, which I find horrifically boring most of the time. But like these guys are hilarious, and anyway, they're very funny. Let me see if I can find this one song, and I'll send you a link to it.
All right. I'm kind of excited about that. I'll check that out too because it sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's called Danny Don't You Know. Okay, I will. Let me find the YouTube link to it.
Yeah, lately I'm trying to think of like a band that I've gotten excited. There's a band called the Cloud Nothings that I really dig. That's probably like the most exciting kind of new rock band that I dig. It's just raw rock and roll, which I dig.
Mm-hmm.
But let's see here.
Okay, I'm sending it to you right now.
I'm fading. I am completely fading at this point. I think I got to call it because I'm like, I just realized like it's taken me about 20 minutes to do something that would take me 5 with rest. So
yeah,
I'm gonna have to call it. But dude, I think this was a good one. I think we made some good content. I think we looked at some cool stuff. I want to check out. I am so cheap that I haven't paid for Spotify. I should because I'm a music nerd, and I think it would be beneficial to be able to, do the Spotify thing. Because if you have a paid thing, you can pretty much listen to whatever album too, right?
Can you not normally?
You kind of can, but it'll like poke you around after a while because it's like yeah. So,
interesting.
Yeah, it'll like kind of let you pick to an extent and then force you to listen to something.
I got onto the family plan a while ago because I hate most of the music that my wife likes. And so like I had spent years like carefully crafting playlists and everything, and then
the algorithm would get messed up.
Well, and then all of a sudden it's like recommending like classic rock and show tunes and stuff. And I'm like, oh gosh, what is happening here? So I've spent the last like 18 months like digging out of like my liked thing. I literally went through and like I went through and de-liked hundreds of songs. On one Sunday afternoon, like months ago, I was like, I can't stand this anymore. I went through. So anyway, so we're much happier in our marriage now because we each have our own account, and Scarlett has an account now because they give you like 5.
Oh, nice.
So anyway,
it's not a bad investment. I think it's a cool idea. And I should stop being such a cheapskate because it's not like crazy expensive either.
Right.
I'm the guy who's like, oh, it's free if I just listen to one brief commercial. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I did that for a long time. So.
But I actually think it might be a smart idea because there's some stuff I dig, and it I think in the long run saves money, right? So you don't have to purchase every album. Yeah,
well, you don't have to purchase anything. I haven't purchased music in years.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
So yeah,
I like the idea.
Where can we find your stuff, Josh?
All right. Well, if I'm not perusing some strange independent music shop for deep cuts of Tom Jones, I am. I will be selling these books, 2 stories out from Marcosia Enterprises, which you can get on Amazon.com for a ridiculously low rate. I believe it's like a little over $6 now. I know, very steep price for a $20 book. And with Prime, you can get it for free. And other than that, you can follow me on joshuakemble.com or see me on Corey's channel every once in a while when we do the indie review show, or on my own channel when we do the indie review show, which will alternate from our channels. That's a long-winded plug.
Do you want to tease what you're covering next week, or surprise us?
Oh my goodness, I still have not picked. So it'll be a surprise.
The thing is, you want to surprise us. We are totally on the ball. We know what we're doing for the next 6 months.
I'm just going to pull a real deep cut. Yeah.
Yeah, in no way in this show is just slapped together at the last second. As I literally, I'm laughing because right before we went live, I had forgotten that it was Monday, and I'm running around my house going, oh crap, I'm doing this thing in a few minutes. It's like 9:58. We're going live in like 2 minutes. I come downstairs, I turn my camera on, I turn the lights on, and then I'm like, it's my turn to pick a book. So that was carefully crafted years in advance, and I've been planning this day for quite a long time. I didn't just grab a book off my shelf and open it. So some days my reviews are much better than others. Today was not a great review. So anyway, you can find my stuff at CoreyKerr.com, CorYkerr.com. I may or may not be live streaming after this a little bit, so watch out for that, because I'm probably gonna go till like 4:30 this morning. So
that's a wise way to go. Just yeah, I would love to, but I'm all out. I'm all out of mana. All right. So all right, guys. Thanks, and I will see you guys on the next one. And stay tuned if Corey continues his live stream. It will be on his channel, so make sure you guys check that out. And I wish I could stay with it, but this is definitely one of those nights where I had a late night last night, so I'm out. Yeah. Thanks to everybody in the chats too. That was super awesome. Kayla, Gary, all of you guys are awesome. So, all right.